Hello everyone, tonight we will walk through an ancient field, where the breeze smells of dust and aged leather.
We will wake together before the sun, in a time when fear was shaped like a helmet, and discipline was heavier than armor.
But do not worry,
You are safe here. The sound of the march will be only a soft echo.
and even the hardest stories, when told calmly, can lull you to sleep.
Today, we are going to visit a Roman camp,
But not the one whose glories are told in the marble squares.
but the real one, which was located in the cold of the north, between the mud and the silence.
Where men learned not to cry, and where, sometimes, even longing had to be hidden under a sweaty tunic. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here.
It helps me keep whispering old stories, night after night.
And if you want, share in the comments where you are listening to me from.
And what time it is there. I like to imagine this peaceful army of nocturnal souls spread across the world, listening together.
Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan to create that soft hum in the background, or leave the window ajar to feel the night air.
Take a deep breath.
Let's begin tonight's journey together. Waking up before the sun is not an event. It is a habit that sets in without asking permission. The early morning cold is biting, but it is no longer surprising. It is almost part of the uniform. I feel the leather still damp against my skin, as if the armor carries the sweaty memories of the previous days.
There is no time for grief, only for the automatic gesture of putting it on. The helmet rests on my head like a metallic omen. Its smell is strong, somewhere between rust and old skin. No perfume can overcome this aroma. It enters our nostrils and lingers, like a subtle reminder of where we are.
Of who we need to pretend to be. Discipline doesn't shout here.
It whispers in every gesture, in the silence between words, in the way we fold the blanket, how we align the shields, how we swallow our anger.
Everything has an order.
Even the way we wake up.
Some say it builds character, others say it just empties us. I don't know. I only know that order is lighter than the fear of making a mistake, and that a centurion's gaze can weigh more than any sword.
There was a time when I questioned why everything was so rigid. Now, I understand that rigidity is what remains when there is no luxury.
Luxury here is survival,
Comfort is not being noticed, breathing deeply without attracting attention.
being one more, and still remaining whole. The war has not yet arrived today, but it always lurks, like the warm breath of a hidden beast. And the leather I wear is more than protection.
It is armor against myself. I miss the light touch of soft fabric, a pillow.
A morning without orders, but all that is stored somewhere I cannot visit now.
The present is made of leather, metal and dust.
My senses have adapted.
Touch has learned to differentiate the small discomforts.
Smell has learned to ignore the staleness of old sweat. And the mind, well, the mind floats.
Sometimes away, sometimes just inward. The first thing I hear is the sound of buckle. One by one, the others get ready too.
There is a murmur of footsteps and contained sighs.
No one complains. This is part of the unspoken agreement.
The pain exists, but it has no name,
Nor place,
it dissolves into everyday gestures, and the day begins like this.
without announcement, without haste. It just begins.
Like a melancholic repetition that we have learned to accept as routine. The light has not yet touched the ground of the camp.
But the bodies are already moving. Silhouettes take shape in the mist,
There is something ethereal about this moment,
as if we are still between dreaming and waking. And perhaps we are,
because life here is made up of small transitions, from sleep to waking,
from man to soldier.
from fear to obedience.
And wet leather is always the first to remind us of this.
There is a silent comfort in this ritual, a kind of harsh but familiar embrace.
As if repetition, however harsh, were a form of belonging. And while the sun is still asleep, I am already standing, breathing the same metallic air as always, with the same weight on my shoulders.
But with something new too, a drop of resignation that makes me, in some strange way, continue.
When the first steps are taken, the world is still grey.
The earth is damp beneath our feet, and everyone's breath comes out in short clouds.
Marching here is not a displacement.
It is a way of existing.
It does not matter if the destination is near or far. What matters is the march itself. The synchronized sound of sandals hitting the ground mixes with the internal sound of the heartbeat. Each step echoes inside and outside,
As if the body itself were an extension of the road.
Soon, the heat appears, not from the sun still peeking behind the hills, but from the effort. The blood moves faster, the leather heats up, the armor begins to tighten, and the sand enters through cracks that seemed closed. Little by little, the discomfort stops being noticed, or rather, it becomes so constant that it becomes part of us. Pain also learns to march.
And it accompanies us in silence. The ground is rarely flat. There are invisible stones that bite your heels.
Branches that pretend to be just leaves. Slopes that bend your knees.
But we keep going.
Like a silent procession. What do you think about during a march? Sometimes nothing. Sometimes everything.
Some memories come back with force.
Others vanish like smoke. The body keeps going, even when the mind wanders. And that's what scares you the most. Discovering that you don't need to be present to keep walking. I remember one particularly long day.
25 miles. They say it was less, but my feet disagree.
At the end, I felt like I was no longer walking.
I was floating on my own fatigue. There was a strange peace in this exhaustion.
As if the pain was the only true thing.
The only stable thing. And yet, I didn't complain.
No one complains.
Because here, fatigue is collective.
And loneliness.
2. There is a companion who always walks beside me.
We don't talk much, but we share the same rhythm. Sometimes a look is enough. He has already fallen once. He was pushed by those behind him. He was almost trampled.
But he got up.
He always gets up. And that, somehow, reminds me that I can do it too. Even when my bones seem to want to stop. Even when my feet no longer know where they are.
The march teaches an ancient form of resistance, not heroic.
Just continuous.
A survival that is built with every meter. There is a painful poetry, a kind of prayer made with the body.
And when the day ends, we look back and don't remember the path. Only the sound of our footstep.
The weight of our shield, and the desire to lie down, even on rocks.
And then, as if in a whispered relief, the signal is given. We can stop.
And at that moment, the leg that still walked alone also rests. But the echo of the march continues.
Inside the head. Inside the chest. And that is where it remains. Until the next day, when the wet leather will be put on again.
And the steps
will begin again. After the march, there is a brief moment.
Almost sacred.
It is when we sit in a circle and receive the day's meal.
The barley bread, hard as a warm stone, arrives surrounded by dust and silence. Along with it, a piece of dried meat.
And a small amount of vinegar diluted in water.
They call it pasca, an acidic liquid that scratches the throat as it goes down, but warms the inside.
And fools the stomach for a few hours. The smell of food is not appetizing.
It is functional.
It smells of survival.
Of what has been stored for days, perhaps weeks.
No one expects pleasure from food. They just expect it to be there. The taste, forgotten after the second sip.
The barley forms a pasty mass in the mouth, and the meat is difficult to chew.
But no one chews in a hurry.
Because this is the only time when the body can be almost still, almost at peace. During these meals, my thoughts wander far and wide. Sometimes I imagine banquets in Rome.
Steaming dishes, ripe fruit, sweet wine.
But I soon return to the present.
To this rough bowl in my dirty hands.
To this bread that breaks with effort.
To the wooden spoon that I carry as if it were a part of me.
Each one has their own.
As if it were a silent symbol of belonging. Some take advantage of this moment to tell Loki stories. Suppressed laughter echoes between careful bites.
But others just look at the horizon.
As if they were waiting for something. Or someone. Eating here is a meditative act.
Even when hungry. Even when in a hurry. Repetition turns everything into a ritual.
And this ritual is what anchors us, even without realizing it. I remember the first time I tasted this meat.
I thought it was some kind of mistake.
Then I understood.
It is not made to please.
It is made to last.
Like us.
Like this time. Like this army.
Each piece carries enough salt to preserve memories.
And the vinegar, so sour, reminds me that the taste of life here is not sweet.
But it is alive. The funny thing is that, over time, the anticipation of this meal grows. Not because of the pleasure,
but because of the relief.
Because of the break. Because of the pause between orders.
The stomach gets used to it.
And the thought lets loose.
Sometimes I would write a letter just to describe this moment. But too many letters are never sent. So I just think.
I just chew. I just look at the sky.
And when the last bite is swallowed, and the bowl is cleaned with the fingers, a new cycle begins.
Bodies rise.
Blankets are folded.
Shields are replaced. And the march continues, this time inside. With eyes fuller than the belly.
And with memory.
Fed in another way.
The pain here is not always caused by war. Sometimes it comes from the discipline itself. From the rules that hang invisible but heavy. Sleeping while on guard.
Staying in the rear without permission.
Forgetting a gesture, a command, a name. It doesn't take much for the silence to be broken by a dull sound.
A sound we have learned to fear more than the roar of any battle.
When the error is discovered, a circle is formed. There is no shouting, only glances. The soldier is taken to the center.
Sometimes it is a friend.
Sometimes it is you. The wooden rods appear as if they sprouted from the earth. They are simple,
but firm, and they carry centuries of obedience in their worn wood.
The punishment begins without announcement and ends without consolation. The sound of the rod against the flesh echoes for a long time inside the head.
There is no excess blood.
No tears.
There is a contained pain, a shame that cannot be washed away.
No one consoles. No one comments afterwards.
Because everyone knows, tomorrow it could be anyone.
Silence is part of the punishment, and also part of the healing.
Because after the pain comes emptiness.
And after emptiness comes the march. Some say it makes us stronger. Others just accept it. I've been the one who watched.
And also the one who got hit.
In both cases, the feeling is the same, helplessness, but also a strange sense of belonging, as if only after that dry sound on my skin.
I truly became part of it.
It's not pretty, nor fair, but it's real. And the real here is all we have.
There was a man among us, old by army standard, but with serene eyes. He said that each broken rod on his back was a line of a larger text, a text that only those who remain understand.
Maybe he was right. Maybe pain really is an ancient form of writing, and our bodies, parchment, and even after months, I still remember the sound. Not the pain itself, but the sound.
It has a frequency that settles deep in my memory.
And it appears sometimes even in my dreams.
Especially in my dreams.
But when I wake up, everything goes back to normal.
And the normal thing
is to carry on,
with my spine straight, with my eyes steady,
and with the memory stored away.
Because here, learning hurts.
But forgetting costs more, and silence once again reigns until the next rod finds a new error,
a new name, a new echo.
At the end of the day, when the body no longer responds properly, comes the most intimate moment.
We dig a hole in the ground.
Not by order.
By instinct. A narrow groove, just enough to fit our body. With an improvised shovel or with our own hands.
Each one does it their own way. Each one decides where to lie down. And how.
The ground is hard but firm.
Cold but constant.
There is something maternal about the earth that receives.
Even though it is rough, it welcomes.
It is there that I spread my blanket, tie my cloak, and try to rest.
Above me, the dark sky dotted with stars that seem not to care about human wars. Around me, others breathe,
sleep, or pretend to sleep.
Some speak softly, others pray.
One or two write something on wood,
but most just sit in silence. The hole we dug is not just a bed.
It is also a shelter.
And on more restless nights, it even feels like an early grave.
Because here, sleeping is an act of faith. Faith that we will wake up. Faith that we will not be attacked. Faith that, tomorrow, everything will happen again.
There are nights when sleep comes quickly. Tiredness doesn't ask. It just takes.
Other times, the body relaxes, but the mind doesn't. I stay there, looking at the sky, thinking about distant places, about people I may have forgotten,
and the distant sound of owls.
Or my own thoughts. The earth has a smell, a mixture of roots and stories. Sleeping on it is like hearing ancient secrets.
And when the wind blows, it takes away the fear for a moment. Just for a moment.
But sometimes, it is enough. There were nights when I slept with my hand still holding the sword. Other times, with a rock under my head.
And even so, I woke up. And that
is already a victory. The hole dawns with dew.
The blanket is wet. The bones are hard.
But also with a strange lightness. As if, when I lay down, I left some of my weight on the ground.
And when I get up, I feel lighter. Or emptier. Maybe both. And then, I fill the hole.
As if nothing had happened.
As if sleep were a secret shared between me and the ground. And I continue.
Because here, the ground is many things.
It is a base. It is a limit. It is a lap. And also a reminder
that we are always one step away from war.
And half a span away from death.
But for now,
we just sleep.
Where night falls and the sounds of the march finally fade away, the camp transforms.
The tents, made of heavy, poorly stitched leather, close like curtains in a tired theatre.
Inside, the second act of our play begins, the part where no one pretends to be a hero.
Where the clay gladiators exchange scars for whispers, and where silence is not the law, it is a shield. In the tents, people speak in low voices, because even at night, there are too many ears and not enough patience.
Stories are told, with half the truth and a generous pinch of invention.
We remember battles where, curiously, each one was the bravest, but no one argues.
Because arguing is more tiring than fighting.
And tiredness is too precious a commodity to waste. There are letters. Some are read. Others are simply burned.
Sometimes out of shame. Sometimes out of fear that someone will read them.
Other times because, honestly, we no longer remember who they were for. And there is laughter too.
Muffled laughter, as if they were hiding from Caesar himself.
Laughing out loud here could be mistaken for insubordination or madness, and frankly, neither option seems promising. The tense smell of leather, old sweat, and a faint hint of muffled despair, a scent that, over time, becomes almost comforting. Almost.
Because there's something strange about feeling at home inside a triangle of cloth that fits 3 men, a shield, and half a hope. But believe me, I've seen people fight over an extra corner of floor as if it were a Roman throne.
And even if the walls of the tent don't hear, fear hears everything.
Fear lives inside,
Huddled in the corner,
hidden under the blanket. The fear of being next, the fear of not coming back, the fear of waking up. And believe it or not, there are nights when sleeping is the riskiest, because it's in dreams that memories scream, and you can't pretend you didn't hear them.
but still, the tent is a relief, an improvised theatre where, for a few hours, we stop being cogs in the empire.
And we become just men.
Fragile, smelly, sarcastic, and exhausted. But men, and that, around here, is already a luxury. Maybe the only one.
Because tomorrow, the curtain will be folded,
The tent will be dismantled,
the secrets will be buried once again under the march.
and the character of the moment will return to his role, that of the disciplined, silent soldier.
And absolutely convinced that all this still makes some sense.
Our Caesar, to some, a god in the form of a general, to others,
A writer of well-written letters with an ego of imperial proportions. Personally, I saw him as someone who liked maps a lot and not dirty boots much, because he said, "Let's conquer Gaul," with an ease that only someone who doesn't carry a shield can say.
and us, well, we just dipped our feet in the swamp and said, "Yes, sir, the cold of the north doesn't appear in the books."
But I remember it as if it were an old enemy. It would slip through the cracks in our cloak, kiss our bones and laugh at our courage.
And all this while Caesar was writing about bravery. Bravery, by the way, is too beautiful a word for what we did, slipping in the mud trying not to lose our helmet. But he needed the legend. And we, the fire. I remember one night in particular, the wind seemed to have teeth, and not the Romans.
A companion was shaking so much that his shield made music.
Caesar said that we were bringing civilization to those lands.
But to this day, I don't know how to civilize someone while we're running snot down our chins and fighting over mice with the local.
Maybe that's what civilization is, embracing the cold and calling it glory. And there were letters, lots of letters. Some arrived.
Others didn't. I wrote home, describing landscapes that no one would believe,
Fogs that swallowed entire forests, skies that seemed to want to erase us.
but I also lied a little,
I said that everything was fine.
that we were winning.
The truth, in this kind of war, always loses the first round. Caesar loved to make speeches. He would climb on a little white horse and speak as if the world would listen.
We listened,
But what we really paid attention to was whether the countryside would have hot soup then. Because between another city conquered and a lit fire, the fire always won.
we legionaries are practical.
We feel too cold to be poetic.
And when people ask me what I learned from the campaigns in the north,
I smile.
I learned that mud has layers,
That snow never falls the same.
that longing is sharper than a sword.
And that, in the end, every Galata conquered also left a piece inside us, as if the border of the empire was more liquid than solid, and colder than fair.
But don't tell Caesar that.
He likes glorious endings. I prefer the ones with blanket. The Rhine.
That wide, dark river, cold as campaign promises.
It divided the world between those from here and those from there.
But between us,
After a while, no one knew which side they were on anymore.
betray or die. Moral dilemmas always seem sophisticated until you live them under snow and hunger.
I had a friend. His name was Marco. Or maybe Amaro.
You know how it is with so many Ms. Your memory gets mixed up.
He disappeared on a patrol.
Some say he deserted. Others say he was seen with Germans.
I prefer to think he was abducted by some river goddess.
It's more poetic and more comfortable than imagining that he betrayed us or that he sold us out.
Because the truth is this. On the banks of the Rhine, trust is a dying currency. Too many R's.
Half-finished sentence, and the constant feeling that any mistake could be the last.
Or worse, the penultimate. Because the last, at least, is quick.
The penultimate makes you wait for the end.
And around here, waiting hurts more than bleeding. The centurions try to maintain order.
But order doesn't warm, and it doesn't feed.
And sometimes, it doesn't protect.
I've seen people punished for sleeping too much, but I've never seen anyone punished for being afraid. Fear is invisible and resistant. It penetrates armor, shields, and orders,
And it settles in.
like an underground current. They say that Caesar knew everything, that every move was watched, that deserters had a certain fate.
Maybe so. But down here, the truth always arrives late.
And even those who obey begin to wonder, how far is it worth obeying?
How long? The Rhine does not answer. It just flows, cold, silent.
Witness to broken promises and frozen loyalties. It's funny how no one talks about this out loud.
But between the lines, everyone knows.
There's something broken.
Something tenuous, a thread that separates honor from instinct.
And every cold night by the river makes the thread thinner.
More shaky, easier to cut. And in the end, there are those who stayed, who keep marching, who pretend not to remember, who prefer the whip to doubt, and who, secretly, look at the water,
wondering if swimming away would really be so wrong. They say the 9th Legion has disappeared in Britain.
Gone.
Like a breeze disappearing over the hills. I've always thought that was a beautiful word.
Disappear.
It's elegant, almost magical, but in the military, disappear means something else. It means bodies never found.
Screams never heard.
Orders never carried out.
Sometimes we whisper about it around the campfire,
but never too loudly.
As if the wind itself could hear it.
Because no one wants to be the next rumor, the next legion to become history. The silence surrounding the 9th's disappearance is louder than any battle, and it settles like a low cloud inside your chest. No one speaks, but everyone feels it.
The official theory is that they were ambushed, that the British hid in the mists and swallowed them.
Like a monster that only appears when you are very far from home and very close to the end.
But some say they deserted.
That they fled to live among the barbarians.
And that today they live in peace, with shaggy cloaks and warm beer.
Personally, I find it hard to believe.
Peace takes much more courage than war.
Sometimes I dream about it, with the thick fog, the muffled sounds, and a road that ends in nothing.
I see myself among them, marching without knowing that it was the last day.
That grey sky would be the last roof, and I wake up sweating.
Even in the cold, even without having moved from the spot.
There's something symbolic about this disappearance. The idea that an entire legion could disappear is comforting, in a way.
It makes it seem like maybe no one would notice if we disappear too.
And at the same time, it's terrifying.
Because it shows that even the many can be forgotten, and that the Empire
continues, with or without you.
But of course, the generals don't like this story. They prefer to keep the myth under control.
They talk about the 9th as if it were a legend.
An exception, an isolated case, and we down here pretend to believe it.
Because questioning only leads to more questions, and too many questions are a dangerous luxury around here.
So we move on, we march.
We pretend not to see the ghosts in the fall, and every time a legion is sent to Britannia, we exchange glances. We laugh softly, and we disguise our fear with a simple phrase, good luck.
And if you disappear, let me know. Rome loves to talk about thermal baths, warm baths, perfumed oils.
Ah, the luxury of a Roman bath.
For those who can afford it. Here on the front, bathing has a different face.
It happens when it rains, or when we cross a river, preferably one without a current.
Sometimes when blood is splattered. It's strange, but there are days when we leave combat cleaner than when we entered. The veterans don't even care anymore.
A little mud, a little dried blood, a little sweat from the other person. All of this forms a new protective layer. As they say around here, the stinkier it is, the less the enemy gets close. An olfactory strategy, so to speak. And it works, especially with your own comrades. But there are special occasions, like when an unexpected rainstorm hits and everyone runs to get wet. Armor, shield and all.
It's a sight worthy of a painting. 30 grown men spinning around underwater like children too dirty to even play. It's almost romantic. Until someone slips and reminds everyone that hygiene is secondary to stability.
Of course, there are those who try to maintain some kind of ritual.
They use sand to scrub their skin.
Some even make improvised soap with animal fat.
But in the end, the smell comes back.
It always comes back. As a gentle reminder that we are human, yes.
But not so much. And that Roman glamour really travels with the troops. The most curious thing is that, over time, the sense of smell adapts. Or surrenders. The smells mix.
They form a new aroma.
A scent of war, of the field, of resistance. And there is something almost comforting about that.
When you can identify your companions by their smell before you see them, it is because you have become part of the pack.
And if, by chance, someone shows up looking to clean, be suspicious. Either they just got back from a punishment, or they got too close to the officer.
Or worse, they took a bath voluntarily.
In any case, it's a suspicious behavior.
Because here, bathing is not a right. It's an accident. So when people ask me what bathing was like in the Roman army, I smile.
And I say, sometimes bloody, because, ironically, it was in battle that the body was most purified.
And the soul, well, that was still dirty.
Even when the camp seems to be asleep, There are sounds that never cease. Chains, swords scraping against metal, the rhythmic clank of the patroller's armor.
It all echoes as if the Empire itself breathes through the portholes.
And sleeping here is always sleeping under guard, by the centurions, by the gods.
By one's own thoughts.
The metal sound becomes familiar.
Almost reassuring, as if to say nothing has changed. Everything remains under control.
A soundtrack of power and paranoia.
Because here, to watch is also to be watched.
The soldier who passes by your tent with measured steps could also be the one who turns you in tomorrow. By mistake, by malice, or by overzealousness.
All three options are equally common. There are nights when I pretend to sleep just to listen. The pattern of footsteps, the sound of shield hitting thigh, the distant whisper between two sentries.
So many things said without saying. So much fear camouflaged as duty.
I have seen trained men fail,
not with the sword, but in their nap.
and pay for it with hours of painful silence.
Sometimes definitive. The irony is that the more secure the camp, the more tense everyone becomes.
Peace is never reliable. It sounds like the calm before an ambush.
And then, any noise a twig, a throat clearing, a deep sigh becomes an alarm. Because here, real danger doesn't come screaming, it whispers.
Like metal rubbing against metal in the dark. And even those who sleep half awake.
Their ears are trained to distinguish the sound of normal from the sound of terror.
I've woken up to a simple slide of a blade out of its sheath.
And there was no threat.
It was just a comrade cleaning his sword.
At 3 a.m,
Because apparently, nothing relaxes you more than polishing steel while others try not go crazy.
over time, we develop a kind of selective hearing.
We ignore constant sounds and fear the silent ones.
Because absolute silence is never a good sign. When everything is too quiet, it's a sign that chaos is just approaching more carefully. And then, even lying down, even with my eyes closed, I listen, and I smile.
Because the metallic sound of surveillance
Is what tells me that I am still alive, and with luck, I will wake up to another day.
There is a curious moment before every fight.
A moment when everyone pretends to be ready, but in reality, they are just trying to remember why they are there. And that is when the drawings begin to appear on the ground, with the tip of a spear, with a dirty finger, with anything that marks the ground. It is not art.
It is superstition. It is desperation disguised as tradition.
Some draw faces,
Maybe gods.
maybe faces they saw for the last time before embarking on this life of dubious glory. Others draw spirals, letters, signs that even they don't know where they came from. A colleague of mine, named Tito, always drew a crow's foot.
He said it brought luck. Curiously, he survived too long for me to doubt it.
As for me, I never drew anything, but I observed, carefully.
Because drawings tell more than men's expression.
They show what they fear, what they hope for.
What they have lost. It's as if each line were an unsent letter to the world.
A whispered request to the earth, before the blood covers it. Of course, the officers don't like this.
They say that superstition is for barbarians.
That a legionnaire trusts in steel, not in symbols.
But funny enough,
The same officers wear amulets around their necks and avoid looking at cracked mirrors.
hypocrisy is another kind of tradition.
And that, well,
That survives all wars.
the ground before the battle becomes a canvas of collective anguish.
It is there that we leave pieces of who we were before we took up the sword.
As if writing on the ground was a final gesture of humanity.
Because then comes the final march. And in it, there is no room for poetry.
Only for impact.
Some of these symbols disappear with the dust.
Others are erased by blood.
And there are those that remain, like scars on the ground.
I remember a field in Germany where, even after the fighting, the marks were there, untouched.
As if the ground itself wanted to remember what was asked of it before it was stained.
So yes,
Before the battle, look at the ground.
it speaks,
More than the speeches. More than the drums.
even more than the shouts.
Because there, between crooked lines and broken circles, is the most real part of the soldier, the one that still believes.
Even if only a little.
There are days when everything seems so bad, so disastrous, that even the sight of a crow becomes a reason to smile.
And I'm not exaggerating. The creature lands on a rock, lets out that strange call, and we interpret it as a divine sign. Everything will be fine, someone says.
And everyone nods, as if Jupiter himself had sent the animal with a celestial memo.
In truth, no one really believes.
But pretending to believe helps. It works like a mental anchor, a collective act that prevents despair from opening the door wide. And if there's one thing we legionnaires do well,
It's pretend.
we pretend to be brave. We pretend to have faith. We pretend that our armor isn't too tight.
So why not pretend that a crow can change destiny? Sometimes it's a coin flipped in the mud. Other times, a warm wind in the middle of the frost.
or a ray of sunshine that escapes through the clouds at just the right time. Small details that, in another context, would be ignored.
But here, they're everything.
Because when you live in a cycle of uncertainty, every detail becomes a narrative.
And every narrative is a way of not going crazy.
I remember a fellow soldier, Gaius, who firmly believed that thunder before battle was a good omen.
Of course, 4 out of 5 times.
He came back with fresh cuts, but the last time, he won a dice contest right after the thunder.
And that was enough for him. Superstition doesn't need statistics. It just needs a good story. The most beautiful and saddest thing about all this is that, deep down we knew.
We knew that the crow was just a crow.
That the wind was just wind, but continuing to believe was less painful than admitting that we were adrift. It was more bearable than facing the emptiness of a life controlled by orders from others and internal silences. And so the little signs became beacons.
Crooked, unlit beacon, but beacons nonetheless.
They didn't show the way,
But they said, "You are not alone," and that was more than enough.
it was almost comfort.
And in the Roman army, comfort is a luxury.
A luxury made of black feathers and 3-toed feet.
So next time you see a crow perched somewhere weird, don't ignore it.
It could just be a crow, but it could also be the universe saying, breathe.
It's not over yet, and around here, that's cause for celebration.
Crying doesn't go with armor.
It doesn't go with a sword. It doesn't go with what's expected of us. So what do?
We write, with charcoal, with ink, with whatever you have, on pieces of leather, wood, even on the inside of the shield. Letters that will never leave here, that will never find their destinations, but that still need to be written. I have a collection of these invisible letters.
About 5 to my mother, 2 to someone who might have loved me once, and a very long one to myself.
All written by the light of a dim lamp, with my hand shaking more from fatigue than from emotion.
And all with that pathetic tone of someone who wants to say a lot, but is afraid of sounding weak.
Because being fragile is dangerous, not because of the pain, but because of the looks. Here, weakness has a smell, and it is not allowed to exhale it. So we write.
We write to give form to what we cannot say.
To not explode, to not disappear. The letter becomes a gentle mirror.
A confidant without judgment. A piece of humanity wrapped in crooked letters. Some hide their letters inside their helmets.
Others bury them. Some burn them as soon as they finish.
They say that writing is like spitting poison, and that reading what has been written is like drinking it again.
So it is better to let the fire burn.
There is a relief in that, to see the words rising in smoke, as if they were discreet prayers going nowhere. I once heard of a guy who once tried to send a letter. He spent months waiting for a reply.
It never came. Since then, he writes only to himself.
And he swears that this is enough.
Maybe it really is.
Because, in the end, we don't write to listen. We write to remember who we were, who we wish we had been, or who we still pretend to be.
I sometimes write before I go to sleep. Not much, just enough to calm my mind.
A sentence, maybe 2.
Simple, short words.
Like whispers.
And when I'm done, I leave it there.
Next to the blade. As if something happens, at least someone will read it, and understand that, behind the bronze and the dust, there is still a heart.
Even if he knocks in silence.
Even if no one hears him.
Even if the letter is never read. Sometimes longing doesn't come with tears. It comes with sound. A murmur behind the tent.
A distant song. A phrase said with an old accent. It's in those moments that something inside us snaps.
Not loud.
Not painful.
Just inevitable.
Like a memory that decides to breathe right next to our ear.
I remember a song my grandmother used to sing. It was simple, even naive.
But when I heard a friend whistle it in the middle of Germany, I almost dropped my shield. It was as if time had unfolded a forgotten part of me.
As if an old, dusty string vibrated again.
And for a moment,
I wasn't there.
Of course, I pretended.
Pretending is almost as natural as marching.
I made a joke.
I laughed, like any good soldier. But inside, I was far away. Maybe at home. Maybe in the arms of someone who no longer remembers my name.
Or maybe in the field where I grew up, running without knowing that one day I would run just to obey. They are also the sounds we invent.
The crackling of fire. The friction of a blade being cleaned. The rhythmic tapping of the hilt of a gladius on a shield.
Sounds that lull us. That remind us that, even when we are far from everything, we still exist. That we still have something of our own.
Even if it is just a silly, repetitive noise. Longing is not spoken here. It would be ridiculed. Or worse, heard with pity. So we keep it in the invisible pockets of silence.
And it manifests itself like this, in small noises.
In strange habits. In eyes that are lost for too many seconds. And no one asks.
Because everyone knows this dance. I've seen a man spend hours adjusting the zipper on his armor just to keep his mind off, and another who always whistled the same part of a melody that never ended.
They said it was out of habit, but it was nostalgia, in the form of a sound loop.
An attempt to keep some good memory alive, or at least distracted.
So when you hear a sound that repeats too often in a Roman camp,
Don't ignore it.
it could just be boredom, but it could also be a heart trying to remember who it was.
Among spears, shields,
And silences. Sometimes, to keep from going crazy, we dream of things we've never had. And among the legionnaires' favorite dreams are the Roman villas.
those beautiful buildings, full of columns, fountains and white marble, where the wind seems to blow with more politeness.
Where the wine is served in fine glasses and the grapes never touch the ground.
We imagine the fragrant thermal baths, the long baths, the silent courtyards. We imagine that everything there is clean, calm, safe.
And that, if we lived there, perhaps we would be a different person. Less dirty, less tired,
Less.
Roman perhaps.
But those who truly know these houses know that not everything there is what it seems. Behind the carved columns, there are eyes. Behind the smiles, poison.
Silence is not peace, it is calculation. And every banquet begins with praise and ends with suspicion. Because war there has no sword, it has silver shells.
There are slaves in every corner,
Walking slowly, speaking less.
carrying secrets on trays,
The walls listen, the wines speak.
and the fountains hide more than they refresh.
Luxury is beautiful.
But it is thick.
It has a weight that cannot be seen, but can be felt in the air, as if all that perfection shinned too much. On purpose,
I've been to one of those villas once.
just passing through. I was an escort guard for 2 days.
I've seen more fear in perfumed eyes than on battlefield. I've seen hands tremble as they smile. I've seen a man die for saying something out of turn and another promoted for keeping quiet.
After that, I happily returned to my stinking tent.
At least here, betrayal smelled like blood, not lavender. At least here, no one pretended to like you.
They just obeyed.
And ironically, that was more honest.
So yes, keep dreaming about the villa.
It's beautiful.
From afar.
But remember, the columns support the roof, but they also hide the shadows.
In Rome, toasting can be an art.
Or a sentence. It depends on the glass.
And who is at your side?
Dinners for the elite are true battles disguised as celebration.
Polite smiles, rehearsed laughter, and glasses raised with millimeter precision.
Every sip is a test.
Every dish a possible epitaph. The wine,
Excellent. The kind that burns when you enter and kisses you when you leave. But also,
easy to change.
a little dust here, a drop there.
And there you have it.
An influential citizen becomes a memory, and everyone sighs with regret. A perfectly rehearsed regret, of course, because no one there is really surprised.
They just pretend.
It's protocol. It's funny how, among the rich, betrayal has manners.
It has perfume. It has etiquette.
It kills with class. But among us, in the camp, betrayal is more direct.
A push, a cut, a look, and that's it.
There's no mystery.
No folded napkins, just consequences.
I once heard a senator say that soldiers don't understand subtlety. I smiled inside. Because their subtlety
Are just cowardice with a veneer. Here, when someone hates you, they show it.
and if they're lucky, they just grumble. If they're unlucky,
Well, you don't even know.
but at least they don't serve you wine first.
In that same villa where I served, I saw a toast between 2 men who hated each other. Glasses were clinked elegantly.
But their eyes were dueling.
One died 2 days later.
Food poisoning, they said, but no one believed them, and everyone kept eating. After all, good manners above all else,
It's a strange world. This one of the powerful,
where every gesture is rehearsed,
where a handshake can be a threat.
where the greatest sign of affection can be a full glass. That's why I've always preferred the countryside, where death can come at any moment. It's true, but at least it doesn't come with China.
So if you are ever invited to a banquet in Rome,
Smile, toast, and eat a little.
or eat a lot, it doesn't matter. In the end, what matters is whose cup it was.
When they talk about the Roman elite, they talk about white tunics, tall columns, soft carpet, but no one mentions paranoia, the kind that lives among the pillows, that hides behind the Egyptian linen curtain. Because, ironically, the more fragrant the environment,
The stinkier the fear tends to be.
and their fear has a name, a surname, and a beautiful signature in wax.
I have guarded men who had not slept for days, not for lack of bed, but for excess of imagination.
They imagined that someone would stab them in their sleep.
That the slave would smother them with silk, that the wine from the night before was still circulating, just waiting for a command to kill. And I, standing by the door, with my sword sheathed and my eyes open, thought, is this luxury? They have food, baths, theatre,
but they also have lists. Invisible enemies.
disputed inheritances.
A mistake in protocol can cost a life.
A misplaced comment, a career.
That's why every gesture is measured.
Every smile is political.
And every dinner, a play that no one has rehearsed, that everyone pretends to know. Meanwhile, we in the countryside sleep with our heads on the rocks, but at least we know who hates us.
We know that the enemy comes from the front or from behind. Yes, but without ceremony. Here, death does not ask for permission.
It arrives sweaty, smelly, dirty with mud, and for that very reason, it is more sincere.
I remember one night when I escorted a tribune. He had 5 pillows.
And 2 daggers hidden in his nightcap.
He would doze for 15 minutes and wake up sweating.
At dawn, he asked me if I had slept well.
I said yes.
He smiled sadly,
As if to say, I envy you. And for a second,
I believed him. The truth is that comfort is not a mattress. It is a clear conscience. It is knowing that no one is flattering you out of self-interest, that no one is going to kill you with perfume. That wine, no matter how bad it is at least honest.
and that is a rare kind of peace. So yes, the robes are soft,
The jars are golden.
but the look of those who live inside is always restless, as if, even surrounded by everything, they knew that what they lack most is air.
They talk a lot about glory, about how beautiful, eternal, golden it is,
But no one talks about its smell,
because glory has no smell. But death, oh, it does.
and it's not pleasant.
It's iron, hot flesh, trampled blood, and a hint of fear that enters through the nose and never leaves. A mixture that sticks
To the body,
to the soul and to the clothes.
I've heard generals wax poetic about victory in the field, but none of them labor a stabbed comrade, trying to ignore the smell of ripped out intestine.
None of them had to wipe dried blood off their hands with sand because there was no water, and none of them carried a headless body just to keep the crows from you first. Glory is what they send to the bards. Death is what's left for us.
And yet, we carry on, because, somehow, it makes sense.
Or at least, it seems to. Because if you don't,
Your mind breaks, and here, it's better to have one less leg than a broken mind.
some say that the smell of death is the smell of truth.
And maybe it is, because the moment it passes by, all lies fall away.
Courage, loyalty, fame.
Everything becomes details.
All that remains is the sound of breathing.
Yours, his, and then only yours. And yet, we come back, we march, we sit,
We write letters. We laugh at bad jokes. Because that's what death teaches us.
that the next day is a chance.
That each morning is a slap in the face of statistics.
And that continuing, even without understanding, is already a miracle in itself. So yes, the battlefield has a unique smell. But it's not that of glory,
It's that of flesh,
of fear.
of reality, and of what's left when everything else is stripped away.
It's ugly,
It's raw,
and yet, it's ours.
because in the end, glory is perhaps just that. Surviving long enough to tell the story, even if no one wants to hear it with all the smells. There are nights when all I want is to be someone with no history, no mark,
No armor.
no orders, someone who simply
Sleeps, lies down, closes his eyes, takes a deep breath, and sleeps. Without fear of attack, without the weight of a shield.
without the sound of chains in the dark.
Just the sound of the wind, maybe. Or of a woman turning on her side in bed.
It sounds silly, I know.
But after months of marching, fighting, digging holes to sleep in, the greatest luxury in the world becomes a mattress. It doesn't have to be good. It just has to be there, waiting.
As if to say, you don't have to prove anything today. I've tried to imitate that feeling.
I've folded my cloak carefully. I've laid down on dry leaves, with my eyes closed, trying to imagine I was in some quiet village, with the smell of bread baking, and a dog barking in the distance.
It almost worked, but then a scream echoed, and I remembered, I'm still a soldier. The body hurts.
In new places, even. Places I didn't even know could hurt. But the mind
just wants a normal night's rest,
without a watchman, without an alarm,
without the fear of someone waking you up to tell you that your partner lost his leg.
or his head. I think about it a lot before I go to sleep.
About the simple life.
In a field, with trees and children running around, where the loudest sound is the rustling of leaves.
And where tomorrow doesn't bring orders, only possibilities.
Maybe that place exists, maybe it doesn't.
But while I dream about it,
I sleep, and when I manage to sleep, it's as if this place welcomes me, for a few hours.
like an invisible shelter, a truce given by the gods, or by myself.
And in those hours, everything goes silent, even the wet leather.
Even the sword next to my head.
everything falls asleep.
And tomorrow, yes, we march again. But for now, close your eyes with me.
And dream like a civilian.
If this story touched some forgotten part of you, well, there are many more waiting for you here.
Less glory, more truth, and perhaps a little unexpected comfort. I'll be right here, whispering stories into your dreams, whenever you need me. Good night.